Hey, Susie. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Hello. Hey, Sparky. Morning. Where are you guys coming in from? Where are you calling in from? From Italy. Ooh. I'm in Colombia. It's not nighttime. I'm just in a dark room. Because I like working and filming in a dark room. Amsterdam. Cool. Anywhere else? Anyone? Hey, Dana. Hey, Stream Royalty. My name's Grayson. You follow me, or I think you do. Durango. Where's Durango? Germany. When you guys say the country, say the city as well. I'm always curious. Chicago. Nice. I've never been, but... Stream Royalty. Are you alright? Paris. Nice. I was just in Paris, and... I love Paris. Everyone dresses so well in Paris, you know? Munich, beautiful. Den Haag, nice. I lived in Leiden for a year in the Netherlands. Washington, cool. Where's Chennai? Hanover, Germany. Okay, cool. I don't know a lot about Hanover. Could you give us one word, Kirsten, on what Hanover is all about? Namaste, India, very cool. Welcome, everyone. I'm coming on here today because I just made a few videos. I just filmed a few videos talking about purpose and figuring out what you want to do with your life, because it's something that I struggled with a lot throughout my life, you know, and it's still something that I have to work with, although I've made some good strides. And I just want to hear all of your thoughts on purpose, whether you have your purpose, what helped find it, what you're thinking about your purpose, what you might want it to be. And we can discuss techniques that help you get towards living a life where you're more aligned with your purpose. And I'll start with just my own story, and you can put comments in the chat about purpose, any questions you have, and I'll go, if you get a haircut. You don't like my hair? I think my hair makes me stand out. But anyway, so for years with purpose, I just made a video on this. I thought that purpose would come. I thought that it would just be like this eureka moment where if I did enough research, if I read enough articles, that I would come across my purpose. And I would feel it would be perfect right away, and it would feel like, wow, this is it, right? And so I read so many articles. I procrastinated. I ended up feeling bad because other people were living their purpose and cool lives and all this type of stuff. And I did this for years. And I used different things, Ikigai, articles, all this stuff. And I think that part of the problem is I was going at it the wrong way. Or since then, I've realized that there's a better way to go about living a life that feels purposeful to you. And it's a little more subtle. It's not about using your logic brain, thinking, writing down, creating a game plan. It's about paying attention to what you truly love, what you're curious about, what you're drawn to, what you like doing when no one's watching, all of these types of things. And one trap that people fall into is if that thing for them is playing video games, or if that thing is chatting with friends or something like that, then right away they get in the problem of, oh, well, how will I monetize it? How will I make money from that? I need to make money. And then that stops them from pursuing it. But the thing I'll tell you is that don't worry about that part right at the beginning. Worry more so about doing things that once you leave them and once you've done them, you feel energized. You feel excited, right? So, for example, for myself, a couple years ago, I just started this, and this is a process of noticing yourself too. I started noticing that I would struggle a lot. I'd have like different mental things and all this type of stuff. But one thing I would do is I would read articles all the time. I was always trying to figure out what was going on, what mental thing I might have, how to deal with it, all this type of stuff, right? And then I just kind of realized one day, hey, I like learning all of this stuff. Like, I'm interested in this stuff. And maybe this, because it hasn't changed for 5-10 years, maybe I'll always like reading about these things, psychological concepts. And once I really understood that, I realized, well, why don't I design a life and a career around this thing that I constantly am drawn back to for no reason. I'm not drawn back to it because I'm forced into it like school or like it's my job. I just go back to it because I just feel kind of compelled to. And that's why when people talk about they have a calling, this is kind of what they're talking about. It's the feeling of being called back to the thing that you love doing just spontaneously. Sometimes you're so kind of not attached to what you truly would love to be doing that it's hard to even think about any things that you like doing. If that's the case, a lot of the time there's certain questions that can really help. One of them is paying attention to what you liked as a child. So what were you spontaneously drawn to from the ages of, let's say, 4 to early teens? What were you just kind of spontaneously drawn to? Self-diagnosing, yeah, I'll answer that question. That's an interesting question about self-diagnosing. But anyway, think about things that you were just spontaneously drawn to from the age 4 to early teens. The reason being is that in these years, we're not yet thinking about practical things like money and how is this going to work and this, and we also haven't had people, we don't have as many limiting beliefs. We're kind of just flowing, right? And it's really going towards these activities that you just flow to naturally that's going to get you the best results if you do that in terms of purpose. So you can do that exercise, you can meditate on that question, you can ask your parents, you can ask childhood friends, and come up with potentials. As you're doing this, pay attention to your day-to-day. And I want you to do a task for finding your purpose, okay? Pay attention to your energy levels in your body when you do things, right? If you go to work and afterwards you feel depleted, you feel smaller, you feel whatever, make a note of it, okay? If you hang out with a friend and after you feel kind of neutral, make a note of it. If you have a conversation with a certain person or you come across an idea and you're energized after, make a note of that as well. If you make this a habit, oh hey, my brother's on. If you make this a habit over time, and then cut out the things that are draining you that after you feel really deflated by, and going towards more of the things where you feel energized, this is a right step towards a purposeful life. And this is an ongoing process that you can pretty much do your entire life, but it'll get to eventually to a point where most of the things you're doing for your work or your friendships or whatever, you're energized after. To give you an example, it's taken a while for me to get towards coaching, but after coaching sessions, I'll sometimes be so excited and fired up that I'm like sweating, that I have such a sympathetic response and I'm so energized, and it's just a sign that I really love doing this. So don't think that this is an overnight thing. That's a practice that you can continue to do over time, and it's a matter of essentially distancing away from the things that are draining you and going towards the things that are exciting you. that was a lot of me talking. So if you guys have any questions on purpose, or what you struggle with, or what your purpose is as well, I'd love to hear in the comments. Hey, Linda. Hey, Chris. We're talking about purpose today. If anyone has any questions about life purpose or life direction or anything like that. I'll go back to the question I had a little bit further back in this period that I was explaining to you guys, and some of you might resonate with this, where I was having different psychological challenges and I would read so much online trying to just figure out what was going on. Partly out of interest, but partly out of almost a coping mechanism. And the person asked if I was self-diagnosing. And to some extent, yes. But I wasn't then jumping to conclusions or shifting my behavior or doing anything radical based on that, right? There were times where I self-diagnosed in an incorrect way. But the reality is, in any formal diagnoses, there's so much overlap between different psychiatric diagnoses that it's almost impossible to pin down exactly sort of what your issue is. And underpinning a lot of these issues are things like self-love, things like needing to follow your intuition. And so if you get too caught up in all the symptoms and all like, oh, what's wrong with me? That mindset will just continue to create a problem. I feel like a natural caretaker. I work in the medical field, but not drain me to the end. I honestly feel lost if I'm not taking care of people though. So, EVAM, that's amazing. You might be a natural caretaker, right? And then the question to ask is, do you have any sort of people-pleasing tendencies, and how much do you take care of yourself? Because there's a difference between loving to take care of people and feeling like you have to do that in order to be okay. And a lot of the time when you are feeling like you have to do that, it's because of a sort of people-pleasing tendency that's rooted in your childhood environment, where perhaps you had to please your parents in order to keep the peace. And that's what they call an awning response. So if you love your job and helping people and all these types of things, and you also have time for yourself, for your own passions, and you feel okay on your own, then that's fantastic. But yeah. Tell about searching for purposeful friends. Well, the thing I'll say about finding purposeful friends, Austin, is you end up attracting who you are. And so if you want purposeful friends, you yourself just need to become purposeful. And it's really as simple as that. It's not really the reverse. Sometimes as you're on this process, you'll have one friend that is like, let's say, further along than you, or you'll have a friend where you're further along on a certain journey, and that happens. But for the most part, you're on a similar journey. So focus on yourself first, and then you'll attract certain people into your life. How do people realize they want to be a CEO of a company? Yeah, I mean, for a couple different reasons. I think it's kind of, some people go to become a CEO of a company for egoic reasons. They want status, they want power, they want money, they want fame, all these types of things. And that's a lot of CEOs. Then some people become CEOs of a company just because they're very, very skilled at managing people, and they had an idea of how to improve the world and create a company. So I'd say those are probably the two routes. 2 adult children. Lost my purpose. Well, it sounds like you have an opportunity to regain it. Is it okay to go with the flow instead of trying too much? Yes, it is. Sahaja. Going with the flow instead of trying too hard. Hey, Jade. I'll talk a little bit about that. This actually can relate to purpose as well, and figuring out how to live your life. There's a Taoist philosophy called Wu Wei, which is called effortless action. That's like the translation. So essentially what that is it's taking action, but not in a way that's forceful. And this is something that you have to feel, and you have to get better at feeling, right? One thing I'll say is that if you're really forcing something and you think it's logically the best thing for you, whether that's a job or a partner, and you really, really keep trying and all this type of stuff, and it hasn't worked about 5 or 7, like 8 times, that's an example of forcing it too much. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're just flowing and letting life happen to you, you end up sort of being a little bit of a victim, right? And you're perhaps not assertive enough. So the concept of Wu Wei is to get right in the middle of those two. You're not flowing too much, and you're also not forcing too much. And this is sort of a practice and a skill that you can get better at over time, where you take a direction in a certain way, you take action in a certain way that feels like, you know, you're curious about doing that thing, but you also pay attention in your body, in your energy, as I talked about earlier. You pay attention, is this thing right for me? And you pay attention on a weekly basis. It can even become a daily basis if you get used to this practice. And so that, I think, is Wu Wei. And I'll tell you something interesting about this Wu Wei phenomenon, and because I've experienced it in my own life, is, and so sometimes I notice this. Sometimes I'll notice on my creator journey, for instance, that like one channel starts slowing down, one style of content stops working. And what I could do is I could keep forcing and trying to make that style of video, and oh, but it worked in the past, it should keep working now. Hey, Lucy. But the problem with that is things that work in the past don't necessarily work now. And that's part of this Wu Wei concept, and being able to have a little bit of flow in your life as well, and intuition and following that. So if I'm pushing in one direction too much, and I'm finding just so much resistance, and I'm also not getting energized by what I'm doing, usually I take that as an indicator that this probably isn't the direction for me. When you're in a direction that is right for you, that's aligned with your purpose, you'll still have to put in effort and to have discipline and to put in work, but it'll feel smoother. 1, because you're energized by what you're doing, and 2, because you'll kind of just get these almost lucky breaks, lucky coincidences. You'll meet someone who helps your business somehow, or whatever it is. And on this journey, you'll also fall off at times, right? For a period, you'll feel that, wow, but then you'll stay stagnant, because we always want to repeat past results, especially if we've had successes. And then you'll have to kind of restart that process. And the real important thing is integrating and developing that skill of being able to notice, am I on course? Does it feel like I'm pushing too much in this direction? Or is there a sort of effortless flow in the direction that I'm going? That's what I'd say. Sorry, there were a lot of questions. I missed them. Samantha, I have plans, but then I'm asked to babysit or something. It's easier given. Samantha, that sounds like... So when you have plans and you want to go towards a certain purpose, and then you get distracted by obligations, family, this, that, and you always kind of say yes to all these things, and you have a hard time saying no because you think you'll upset people and all this type of stuff. That's kind of the epitome of a people-pleasing tendency. And people-pleasing is the behavioral response of a nervous system in your body that is doing something called fawning. There are 4 survival strategies that our nervous system use when we're a child and throughout our lives, nervous system responses that essentially keep us safe. Nervous system responses, the reason they're really significant is they actually happen before our conscious processing. So before you can even think, oh God, should I help babysit? Should I whatever? Because you have this fawning response that probably came from your childhood, your natural tendency is to just drag yourself over to help and babysit, right? And that happens before you even have an opportunity to have any sort of conscious intervention there, because this is really at the body level. And our body reacts to situations first, and then our kind of prefrontal cortex, which is the control center. And so if you want to overcome this type of thing, the first is you need to become self-aware of when am I being people-pleasing, right? Go online, read about people-pleasing, what it looks like, and start noticing when you're doing it, right? That can at least have you become more aware of the behavior itself. Then you can start shifting this behavior, starting really small, saying no in a scenario that feels uncomfortable, let's say, but that feels manageable to say no to. A lot of people think that they're being a bad person or they're being a bad mom or friend or whatever when they say no. But what you're actually doing when you say yes to something, but you really want to say no and you want to do something else, is it's actually almost a form of dishonesty. And over time, sort of resentment builds, lack of trust builds, because your friend and all these people, they think you're fine with it. That's just how you are. You say yes to things, you know? You're not people pleasing, that's just how you are, right? And so it's sort of on you to start recognizing how it's out of balance, right? Because it's great to do things for people. It's great to do things for people. But it's just about when is it out of balance? If you're doing things for people at the detriment of yourself, that's actually a disservice to yourself and the people and the community, right? Yeah. Then you resent. Exactly, Samantha. Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, because resentment comes at the end of this sort of people-pleasing response. And I've seen it in coaching. It can happen in many marriages, and then people have to hold on to that resentment for so long. And yeah, so does a little people-pleasing hurt, or is it okay to have the desire to please and impress people from time to time? You know, Zane, I'd say it's okay to a small extent, but because, as I said before, it's a survival strategy, right? And so all of these responses are actually completely appropriate in certain scenarios when it feels necessary. It just becomes a problem when it's your only way of dealing with a scenario. They often say with nervous system health, it's not about getting to this perfect calm state where you're never people pleasing, you're always setting your boundaries, you're always whatever. It's about actually the flexibility. So it's about having a calmer baseline, but it's also about the ability to shift between them. Because there might be times where this fawning response, this people pleasing, is actually really, really helpful and you need to do it. And in the case of a lot of people pleasers, that was in their childhood. So that's where this fawning response was really helpful and literally helped keep them alive. Because when you're a kid, your relationships with your parents and your caregivers, because you're so dependent, is literally life or death. And so whatever scenario is needed then, whatever survival instinct is needed, you will do it, right? So you can be grateful for yourself for developing this survival strategy and continuing to be able to have it. It's just about being able to regulate and shift through the different responses. And there's strategies to do that. And then, let's see. I've done a lot of therapy, especially about my mom and relationship. However, since I started my last relationship, when we fight a lot and I go to sleep, I wake up crying. You know, I'll say it's Teresa Reese. I would say that happens. The question was about a relationship where she's getting triggered and waking up crying and all this type of stuff after having done therapy. Here, I'll tell you something about healing and nervous system healing in particular. A lot of the time, people think that they're taking a step backwards once they find themselves in a relationship where there's a lot of arguments and things like that, and direct confrontation, when in the past, well, there were no problems. There were never arguments. You know, we were always just kind of people pleasing. But in terms of nervous system healing, the capacity to go from a place of fawning, someone who fawns, as we said before, is people pleasing, and so they'd never have arguments. They're all about keeping the peace. But going from that place to a place where you can actually have anger, to have a bit of arguments, to be able to do that, right? It's actually, in a sense, it's a step up in your nervous system, because now you have the capacity to do the fawning, but you also have the capacity to do fight, which is another nervous system response. The thing I'll say is that in that scenario with your new relationship, it's an opportunity for healing. I wouldn't look at it any other way. When a lot of emotional things are coming up in your relationship, it's an opportunity to work through these things. The question then becomes, is this the right partner to be able to work through this stuff? Do they have the capacity to help you work through these things? It's not a sign necessarily the relationship's wrong. A lot of the time, the best relationships are the ones that are going to trigger you the most, because through getting triggered and then working through these triggers and then healing as a result of that and feeling that safety, that's actually where the intimacy comes from, and that's where the growth comes from. And so don't view it as an incorrect sign if these triggers are flaring up in your relationship. But if there's no intention or desire from the other party to do any sort of healing or have any conversations about these triggers, that might be a problem, right? So, welcome, Harry. Oh, I've enjoyed this live. Hope that was helpful, guys. I'm learning more and more about this topic myself, so I guess we were talking about purpose earlier, but we can talk about whatever you guys are feeling, so feel free to put kind of freestyle from here. I think my phone's gonna die soon, so actually maybe I'll plug it in. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, guys, and I'll come and answer them. Never mind. Never mind. Don't have my charger here. Best book on how to fight against people, take advantage of me, and manipulation. Yeah, you can read the 48 Laws of Power. You know, as I've said in many videos, it's still, even if you're not gonna become manipulative or be manipulative, it's still worth learning about the darker sides of humans, because then you can choose and protect yourself and protect people around you. You know, there's no virtue in being naive. So it's crazy how all the problems are coming from childhood. It even makes sense. Crazy idea of raising a child. Yeah, I always think it's crazy how people can just have kids and it's just like the craziest thing ever, and there's not really a lot of training. Yeah, 48 Laws of Power talks about dark psychology and different sort of manipulation tendencies. It doesn't really specifically teach you how to manipulate people, but it teaches you the rules of manipulation, if you're interested in that. Hey, Anna. Does the Japanese culture promote ikigai for people's life choices more than other cultures? You know, I don't know how the Japanese currently view ikigai as a culture. I know it's something that in the Western world we've really adopted and kind of ran with because it's a really useful framework for finding your purpose. I think that the Japanese culture, I was there last year, they certainly take pride in these sort of life philosophies, and they also have some people that live the longest out of anywhere in the world. So ikigai is a really, really helpful one for finding your purpose, even if your purpose isn't going to be some super big business or any sort of thing to do with monetization. It's still worth it in terms of figuring out how to live your life. Yeah. Do you think narcissism is common? You know, I'll say that I think that there's a difference with narcissism. It's kind of a different conversation now. But narcissism, there's a difference between narcissism as a diagnosis, right? And narcissism as a trait. Those are different things, okay? Everyone on the planet has narcissism as a trait, but to different degrees. It's like a spectrum, if you imagine a spectrum, okay? So the trait's like a spectrum. So someone who's really high, for instance, someone might be really high in narcissism trait, but they might actually not have enough different characteristics to have a diagnosis of narcissism. So those are different things. And the thing I'll say is the diagnosis of narcissism is more rare, and it's also kind of more severe. I think people throw the word narcissist around all the time, but what they really mean is that this person has narcissistic trait, or they're high in that trait. So they're grandiose, self-centered, only thinking about themselves, you know, all this type of stuff. The other thing is people often forget about the other traits. So there's narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism. And people often throw these other traits into the narcissist trait as well. So someone might be, for instance, a really big liar in their life, and they call them a narcissist. But that's not really right. Although it might be that they're high in the trait Machiavellianism, right? Which is to your propensity or comfort to lie. So I think that's why narcissism, the word, is thrown around too much. It's because people are pretty much just throwing any sort of dark manipulation behavior under the one term, which, I don't know. I guess, I don't know why that happened, but, you know. But yeah, actual true narcissists, similar to true psychopaths, are actually pretty low as a percentage. I have a question. Can narcissist people be manipulative all the time? No, I think they can pick and choose. I think they're chameleons and they're good at choosing when they want to be manipulative. And it's not all the time. So, thoughts on Jefferson Fisher Lawyer? He got a book coming out in March. Yeah, I really like him. He makes unbelievable videos. Yeah, he makes amazing videos. I wish my videos were as viral as his. He's very, very talented. And just seems like a good dude too. Shout out Jefferson. Go check out his page if you haven't. Especially if you need help with like arguments and you know, these types of things. Because he's a lawyer. Do you believe in manifestation? How is manifestation related to psychology? Ooh, good question. A covert narcissist can show empathy though, right? Yeah. So Jade, I'll answer that question first quickly. And then I'll answer the manifestation. So, so narcissists are just really good essentially at mimicking behaviors, right? So if it's a true diagnosed narcissist, as I said before, that distinction between the diagnosable narcissist versus the person who's just high in trait narcissism, they, as a diagnosed narcissist, would probably also be really high in psychopathy, which means that their emotional response towards doing any sort of manipulation would be really low. If they have a really low physical ability to experience any sort of emotions, they won't necessarily be able to genuinely feel empathy, but they'll be able to fake it because they'll be so good at mirroring and copying people who show empathy that it'll be able to seem like they're empathetic. And that's why so many, I don't know, serial killers or politicians or whatever can really pretend that they're really empathetic, is because of this skill. So yeah. Manifestation, how is it related to psychology? I mean, I do believe in manifestation. I do. And I think that manifestation can also be taught in a lot more of a practical way than people currently do. I think people talk about it in this really woo-woo way, but it's also just really practical. And you can certainly tie psychological concepts into manifestation. Like, I'll give you an example. One thing with manifestation, or one thing that they tell you to do, is to feel and believe that you already have the things that you have, right? Use visualization to imagine your ideal day, this type of thing, right? The reason that that's actually also psychologically relevant, it's not just this spiritual thing that then, the energy goes out and whatever, and I believe that, and that's an aspect of it, but it's also psychologically helpful as well, because what will happen is if you prime your brain, that's called priming, with visualization to desire certain things, what happens is you'll go about your day and your subconscious will pick up things that will help get you to a place where you manifest the things that you want. So for instance, if you spend a lot of time visualizing and manifesting becoming a great actor, when you go out to random dinners where previously you wouldn't have had a conversation with a potential director that you meet randomly or something like this, because you've primed your brain to have this desire and have this outcome, because of confirmation bias and being able to, these sort of psychological concepts, you'll actually just come across people who will help create this reality for you, if that makes sense. So that's sort of how psychology and manifestation can be connected. There's another aspect of manifestation that's a lot more woo-woo, which is sort of the energetic side, where you're actually literally attracting things to you and increasing synchronicities and these types of things. But there's also this more practical psychological component. Okay. I might get going here, but I enjoyed this as always, and I'll post this live as well if you want to rewatch it. And thanks for joining, and I'll try to do more of these. My phone's about to die, so I hope you all have a great day and keep thinking about these topics. I do like the woo-woo side, Jade, yes. You're welcome. I appreciate all of you. Thanks, Becky. Good to see everyone. Have a great day.